Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett, and today we are reacting to San Francisco 49ers training camp day number 4 and practice number 3. Hope you're having a wonderful Friday and a wonderful weekend. Yes, there was Niners practice today, and no, it was not very good for the offense. We learned a little bit about the kick return rule, saw it live for the first time. Deebo Samuel talked about maybe even being a kick returner. We'll dive into that. Brock Purdy may have a new base salary for his new contract extension or his eventual contract extension. We also got some insight into what the backup offensive line looks like, and I'll just tell you now, it's not very pretty. And Chris Foerster talked about the Super Bowl today and took accountability for that and the loss in itself. We're going to dive into everything today. Before we do so, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave that review on the audio podcasting platforms, hit that bell notification, and without further ado, welcome to day number 4 of Niners training camp. It was a good day. It was a much lighter day. It's Friday. Whether you're at your own work or you're a child, you get free dress Fridays in school sometimes. If you're at work, it's casual Fridays. Today for the Niners was a casual Friday, if there ever was one. A much lighter practice, much more relaxed atmosphere. And the reasoning behind that, I'm sure, was because there was a ton of vets that had the day off. I counted 15 total players that did not practice today. Obviously, there's some glaring ones like Trent Williams, who's continuing his holdout, winning a new contract. Brandon Aiyuk continuing his hold in, was not on the field today. I do have to wonder and speculate for myself. I wonder if John Lynch told him, look, Brandon, we know what you're doing. You're out here every single day in front of the cameras, making your presence known. We get it. You're holding in. Can you do us a favor and not do that? I wouldn't be shocked if that was a conversation that was that was had, but that is my own speculation. There were some injuries, obviously. Ricky Pearsall still on the NFI, not back from the hamstring injury, but is expected to be back next week. He was on the sideline today doing drills and working out just like he was yesterday. Demetrius Flannigan-Falls still has not practiced the last 2 days with a lower body injury. Running back Isaac Guerendo has the hamstring injury, has not practiced, haven't even seen him the last couple of days. And then wide receiver Tay Martin didn't practice with what I'm assuming is an undisclosed injury. Then there was the veterans, George Kittle, Nick Bosa, Charvarius Ward, Chris McCaffrey, John Feliciano, Jake Brendel, Spencer Burford, Jacob Cowing, and Malik Collins all did not practice today. Not entirely sure what was the reasoning behind Feliciano, Burford, and Cowing not practicing, but you have to assume Jake Brendel getting the vet day off, along with, again, Collins, McCaffrey, Ward, Bosa, and Kittle. But I already talked about, not sure as to why Burford and Feliciano got the day off. Among those who didn't practice were 3 offensive linemen, with all 3 of them potentially being starters, right? But one of the main ones I want to focus on here is Spencer Burford, because the Niners had press conferences this morning before practice even started. Usually the first day of camp, it's Kyle Shanahan. Second day, it's Nick Sorensen. The third day, it's either Chris Foerster or Brian Schneider, the O-line coach or the special teams coordinator. Today it was Chris Foerster, and let me tell you, it was a doozy of a press conference. Whether you were there in person or you watched on Twitter or YouTube, this was a stellar press conference. Sure, there was some things that were just common knowledge. What'd you think of that guy and this guy and that guy and the other? I will say this, Chris Foerster does seem to like Dominick Puni a lot, to be fair, or to his discredit, doesn't know how to say his name just yet. He even said, is it Puni? Is it Puny? I don't know. I'll call him Puny. But that was not the main takeaway. That was not the biggest takeaway of the day in regards to Chris Foerster's press conference. When last year ended, and rightfully so, Niner fans were pissed off. They were angry. And a lot of their vitriol was pointed to guys like Deebo Samuel and George Kittle who were injured or didn't play well in the Super Bowl. But one guy that got the brunt of the hate was Spencer Burford. And I get it, missed a critical block, late in the game. Chris Jones goes right through and blows him up. Purdy gets hit in what could have been a game-winning touchdown pass to Juwan Jennings, or at least giving Purdy some more time to make a play. Spencer Burford has gotten the ire of Niner fans for the last, 3 or 4 months now. But 5 months, actually. Wow. 5 months. But Chris Foerster this morning took the blame, took responsibility for what transpired in the Super Bowl. He said in a long quote, and I'll summarize it, it weighs on Spencer Burford because he's the one with the bright lights pointed on him. Nobody took the camera over to me and said, there's the idiot that didn't prepare them properly. And that right there struck a chord with me, with fans. For some, it was the first time a Niners coach has taken responsibility on Twitter, whether it's my tweet or others. You can see them saying, why can't Kyle Shanahan do this? And I do tend to agree at times, but it was the first time really since that loss against Kansas City in the Super Bowl, we heard a Niners coach say, I messed up. It's on me when those guys don't do their job right. It's on me when those guys aren't prepared. Did he use the term knuckleheads too much? I would say yes, but what Chris Foerster's getting at here, and it's something that has had Niner fans going crazy, is finally having a coach to take accountability. Now, I firmly believe that a coach can put players in positions to succeed, and it is up to that player to execute. I also believe that a coach needs to put his players in positions to succeed. And I think for the offensive line, mainly the right side, it's gotten a lot of hate, whether it's McGlinchey or McKivitz, Feliciano, Burford. And while some of that can be determined based on that player's performance, I think what Chris Foerster said today was, look, they had to go out there and play, sure, but it was on me because they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what the play was. They didn't know where to be, the technique, where their eyes, their body should have been. That was a head. That wasn't even a head coach. It was a position coach saying, "Look, I effed up." And honestly, I don't think this, but there is a portion of fans that think that press conference this morning made Kyle Shanahan look bad because an offensive line coach did what Shanahan has yet to show or been able to do since being a head coach. Shanahan is very, very conservative in his words. He doesn't like to get questioned. Sometimes the ego gets involved. But Chris Foerster today, and what I can say, and I've been there plenty of times in those press conferences, may have been his most open press conference ever. Now, mind you, I haven't been there after a Super Bowl loss to hear him talk, but they've had 5 months to talk about this. And for the first time at the podium, Foerster was like, look, I messed up. A guy like Burford doesn't deserve that hate. While it comes with the territory, by all means, blame me instead. It's up to me. And I think he talked about that it was really hard for Spencer Burford to handle that, to deal with that, knowing that I missed my assignment. And while it wasn't the only reason, it was a big reason, at least down the stretch of the game, that cost them. And Burford's a young player. He's a 3-year pro now. This is entering into year 3. On the biggest stage of them all, he may have cost his team a Super Bowl, or at least a shot at it, right? So sometimes you forget these are human beings and people, and that there's so many moving pieces involved in playing football. Yes, there's 53 players. Yes, there's 11 guys on each side, but there's so many meetings you have to go into, different coaches for each thing. All these people are communicating nonstop. And I think just for a second, if you could, go watch Chris Foerster's press conference this morning. The answer and question are near the end of the press conference, but It was what you look at and say that, like, when I think of a head coach that takes accountability, Dan Campbell, right? Think what you want of the guy, but Dan Campbell will say, that's on me. I trust my guys so much. It's up to me. Dan Campbell may not be a top 10 head coach to you, but in regard to taking accountability for his own actions, he's one of the best. Today, Chris Foerster looked like, I won't say head coach material, but the way he handled himself in that press conference with the question and the answer was a really good answer. And I think for Niner fans, maybe some vindication into, yeah, this coaching staff has dropped the ball the last couple years. So that was an interesting way to start a Friday afternoon relaxed practice, right? Where half the starters don't even play. But really, really hoping Spencer Burford bounces back. He's a young player, 5th round pick, started the last couple years, kind of thrust back into being a starter in the Super Bowl where he got benched in the middle of the year last year. So it looks like this year they're going to give him another chance to start. We are seeing that rotation of Feliciano, Brendel, and Burford playing right guard and center a lot, and that's probably going to continue as training camp progresses. And in that same press conference, actually, Chris Foerster, he essentially admitted there is a competition on the interior offensive line, whether it be center or right guard, that people like Brendel and Feliciano are kind of jockeying for that center job, while players like Dominick Puni, the rookie, Spencer Burford, and even John Feliciano are fighting for that right guard spot. So I wasn't assuming there was going to be a competition at center a couple months ago, but as time progressed, you can see that San Francisco is kind of like, look, we have all these guys that could start. All these guys bring something different to the table. Let's see, may the best man win. And it might be for the best, who knows? But right now we are having a center and right guard competition. I will say this, though. For a team that wants to go to the Super Bowl, you probably don't want to have 2 offensive line positions having a competition. And maybe it's nothing. Maybe it'll just be the same people it was last year with Brendel and Feliciano starting. But most teams that go to the Super Bowl rarely have 2, usually only have 1. And even then, like I think of Philadelphia and Kansas City, usually it's 1 position that has a couple guys fighting for it, not 2. So don't love it, but if it brings the best out of the guys in that room, I'm all for it. But because players like Burford and Feliciano and Jake Brendel didn't practice today, we got our first look at players like Dominick Puni and Nick Zakelj playing with the first team. And we've talked about, with Aiyuk out and Pearsall not playing and Trent Williams not playing currently, that people like Cowing and Danny Gray and Ronnie Bell get valuable reps. Jalen Moore gets those valuable reps. I think today, looking at it as a whole, with players like Charvarius Ward not practicing today, George Kittle not practicing today, Dre Greenlaw being out, right? Trent Williams not practicing, Aiyuk not practicing, Ricky Pearsall being out, and others. The young players on this team are really getting reps, valuable reps, early in training camp to whether it's prove themselves or at least show, hey, I can actually be something and make a good impression on the coaching staff. That happened today as well. Again, Dominick Puni and Nick Zakelj got first-team reps the entirety of practice. And you also saw young players, late-round picks, undrafted free agents, guys like Jarrett Kingston and Drake Newton getting center and right tackle reps. So it was a good day to kind of get a first taste of what a starter looks like or what Dominick Puni and Nick Zakelj can bring to the table. Unfortunately, it wasn't that good. Now, again, it is practice number 3, day number 4, and these guys are young, right? But for a player like Nick Zakelj who's going into year number 3, I believe, if not year number 4. I think it's year number 3 for him. The clock is ticking. I get your Brock Purdy's former roommate. You don't have that crutch to fall back on now. You have to prove yourself, and for a team that has Ben Barch and Drake Nugent and others that can be backup centers, John Feliciano, there is no room for error for a player like Nick Zakelj. Unfortunately, wasn't a great day for the entire offensive line. In fact, I have some stats that are via Jake Hutchinson on 95.7 The Game, a coworker of mine. He put these out for the defensive line today of San Francisco, going against the backup offensive line. I think the only starter may have been Aaron Banks and Colton McKivitz. So you had two starters out there, three backups out there, and it was not pretty. The Niners defensive line, minus Nick Bosa and Malik Collins, so they also didn't have two starters out there. They had 10 stops behind the line of scrimmage, which, funny enough, were led by Tatum Bethune, rookie linebacker out of Florida State. He had two of them, who, diving into what he did today for a little bit, I've always liked his ability to play Mike linebacker. Today really showed that. Good communicator, being loud, pointing out things on the offense. And we are really seeing young players on this defense, rookies on this defense, kind of showing they have leadership capabilities, which is great. Mustafa, Ji'Ayir Brown, Tatum Bethune, a lot of FSU guys in that grouping, but a lot of young guys kind of being like, look, like if I can take control of a situation, I'm going to show myself off. And Tatum Bethune did that today, had a lot of good stops in the backfield, had two of them, led the defense today. But the defense had 5 sacks as well going up against the offensive line. Now, I'm always someone to say this and point this out, that sacks in training camp don't mean much. Pads aren't even on yet. Once the pads comes on, maybe it's a different story, right? But 5 sacks. If you want to call them sacks, would be sacks, could be sacks, whatever you want to say, they got to the quarterback 5 different times today. Leonard Floyd and Yetur Gross-Matos are back there a handful of times, combined for 1 as well. And there was a lot of pressures. Overall, I'm not going to point to one player and say, you were terrible and you were terrible, because it doesn't do them justice without pads. But as a unit, not a great day blocking for the quarterbacks. And yes, Brock Purdy practiced, and Brandon Allen practiced, and Joshua Dobbs practiced. Didn't make their jobs any easier. Thankfully, for all of those players, it wasn't a terrible day for any of the quarterbacks, but it wasn't a great day for them either. Brock Purdy yesterday was phenomenal. There was even talks, mainly me, saying that he's taken the next step. Today, maybe it was the atmosphere, the relaxed environment. Definitely a step back from a great, almost perfect practice yesterday. But Joshua Dobbs looked more comfortable. It was a step up for him, which was nice to see after having interceptions in back-to-back practices. Brandon Allen looked fine, wasn't great, wasn't terrible, was just there. Basically what a backup would be, right? But offensive line was not great, just not great. One thing I will say, though, is that we have noticed that Dominick Puni has not taken a snap at right tackle. And for a lot of people, a third-round pick, he can play tackle, he can play guard. A lot of people want him to play tackle. They want Colton McKivitz gone. I am someone that has said when he was drafted that there's some value in Colton McKivitz being the backup tackle. He can back up Trent Williams. He can back up Dominick Puni, and it makes your depth stronger. That said, it feels like San Francisco is leaning towards Dominick Puni being a guard sooner rather than later, and I'm sure that's because of the competition at center, and they're not really sure who Spencer Burford is. Now, things may play out, and Dominick Puni could be the backup right tackle and the backup right guard. We shall see, depending on who wins that center job. But as of right now, through 3 practices, Dominick Puni has not taken a snap at right tackle, only right guard, which honestly might be his quickest way to being a starter for the Niners, which young player, 3rd-round pick, if he can start and play well and he can get the reps, he's a good kid. Sitting in there during his press conferences, during OTAs, you can tell he's lively. He wants to get at it. And I think, once he gets in front of the camera more, he will fall into one of the more lovable offensive linemen here. I think about, Trent Williams is great because he's big, he's prestigious, he's a Hall of Famer. Everybody respects Trent, right? But go back to Joe Staley. Well, I'm not saying Dominick Puni will be Joe Staley by any means. No, he could be. Time will tell, but I would not put that on him. I just think of personality-wise, he's goofy, he's fun, he's really likable. And I think the faster he starts, the more comfortable he'll get. And I think for a player like him, this is just me kind of putting myself in his shoes. I can tell the more comfortable he gets, the quicker or the faster he gets comfortable, the better he'll be, the more we will see him come out of the shell, which will be great for him. On the defensive side of things, we did get a glimpse of Renardo Green playing nickelback today. Again, the defense they won the day, if you will. Had a handful of takeaways, had 2 on the day. Renardo Green was not involved in any of them, but good to see that they're trying to get him to play nickel, play some outside, and utilize that versatility. Obviously, through 3 days, San Francisco has not settled on a rotation just yet. It feels like the leader, though, is a Mooney Ward, Lenore playing nickelback, and Isaac Yiadom being the opposite outside cornerback, but it's good to know when they want to move Lenore to the outside or try new things. Renardo Green seems to be, as of now, the current backup nickelback, which is good to see, right? Good to see a young player kind of etching out a role for himself, albeit small so far. He can do almost everything. Good tackler, good in coverage, good towards the ball, can play nickel, can play cornerback, and I wouldn't be surprised at some point if he plays safety, depending on injuries. Going back to the offensive side of the football for a second, we've talked offensive line. I want to talk about tight ends for a tiny bit of your time. We know George Kittle is cemented as tight end number 1, but it does seem like there is no tight end number 2, but we potentially have a leader in that room right now, and it's probably not who you think it is. You would maybe assume it was Logan Thomas, who was signed in the offseason, started for Washington the past couple years. Maybe many of you would say it's Cam Latu, who off the injury, 3rd-round pick. It's a pretty high draft pick for a tight end, 2 rounds higher than George Kittle. Maybe many of you want Brady Willis out there. Jake Tongues, Mason Pline. Seems like it's none of those players. It feels like it's Eric Saubert, who's a blocking tight end. I think was a Denver last year, was signed kind of later in the offseason. Not a big name by any means, a journeyman, if you will. But the past couple practices, Kittle hasn't been on the field. He has been the first man off the bench. He's been tight end number 2. And it feels like in the early portion of OT or early portion of training camp, that Eric Saubert might be a lock for a roster spot, leaving players like Braden Willis, Cam Latu, Jake Tongues, Mason Pline, and Logan Thomas to kind of fight for that 3rd, maybe 4th and final tight end spot. I truly would not be shocked to see San Francisco walk into this year with Cam Latu on the practice squad because he's not ready. He's not ready yet. Maybe he'll never be. To be fair, shouldn't have been picked, but he was. I wouldn't be shocked if it's Kittle, Saubert, and maybe a Braden Willis, younger guy. Or if they want to go the receiving route, maybe it's Logan Thomas, but the injuries have affected him a lot in the last couple of years. So maybe they go the younger route. Kittle, the vet, the all-pro, the veteran blocking tight end Eric Saubert behind him. Then you get into Braden Willis as you tight end number 3. But obviously, it's practice number 3. Kenny Niners in the chat says, Sterling's back at it again. Back again. You're right. I am back, Kenny. Gotta talk Niners with you. It's almost the weekend. The last practice, I think, before pads, if I'm not wrong there. I think pads come on early next week. We got to talk the pre-padded practices, Kenny. I do want to dive into what Fluffy Ninja is saying here, though. Tua gets $212.4 million contract extension. Fluffy, give me 1 second. We are going to discuss what just transpired with the Dolphins in Tua Tagovailoa and how it actually impacts Brock Purdy and the Niners in a positive way. It actually helps them. But let's talk about what happened at practice today for Brock Purdy. And again, it wasn't a good day. It was a fine day. It was, again, kind of boring, relaxed practice. Wasn't too much going on. But for the haters out there, I guess you will say, that are chomping at the bit to bring down Brock Purdy, he did throw his first interception today of training camp. And it wasn't a play where it was a comebacker and a guy jumped a route. It wasn't a play where it was like, what are you looking at? It was a deep ball downfield. He overshot Deebo Samuel a little bit. Ji'Ayir Brown was there, made a nice play, tracking the ball down, intercepted it. But that's mainly the big highlight of the day for Brock Purdy, or I guess low light of the day. It was an interception on an otherwise boring practice where he didn't do much. Again, a light day. Don't make much of it. But I will say this. Despite the Brock Purdy interception, Brock Purdy shouldn't be the takeaway of the interception. It should be the defense and Ji'Ayir Brown, because through 3 practices so far, if my math is mathing, the defense has 3 interceptions and 2 forced fumbles. In my notes, I have Ji'Ayir Brown got one today, Darrell Luter Jr. got one yesterday, and Malik Mustafa got one on day 2 of training camp, practice number 1. So 3 interceptions, 3 different players, all 3 young defensive backs, either rookies or year number 2 players. Then on forced fumbles, a couple days ago was Malik Mustafa. So he has 2 turnovers or 2 takeaways forced, which is great to see. Then today it was Fred Warner, and Isaac Gaydon got the recovery. So through 3 practices, this team has 5 turnovers. Now, that's bad for the offense, mainly Joshua Dobbs, but overall, the defense is swarming, if you will. They have carried that swarming mentality into training camp in the early portions. And again, going back to what I said yesterday, for a defensive coordinator like Nick Sorensen, Sorensen, who was in the ball meetings, just mainly the takeaway turnover forcing guy, being the defensive coordinator, I'm sure he's having a ball. Watching his team create turnovers, force turnovers, get interceptions, get in the backfield, wreak some havoc. When the pads come on, we'll see more. When the regular season starts, we'll make our actual assessments. But through 3 non-padded practices, the defense is getting after it, and it's good to see. And it's not just one player. It is a handful of different players, vets, young players alike, wreaking havoc, getting in the backfield, getting fumbles, getting interceptions. It's good to see. But back to Brock Purdy, the man who threw the pick today. And back to Fluffy Ninja's point of Tua Tagovailoa's brand new contract extension. What does this mean for our man's Brock Purdy? So today, just after Niners practice ended, the Miami Dolphins and quarterback Tua Tagovailoa agreed to a 4-year, not 5-year, 4-year, $212.4 million extension, with about $53.1 million being the average salary per year. Now, let me just say this. It was lower than I expected. A little lower than I expected. And I know many of you, like Bobo right here in the comments, says it means Brock Purdy's getting $300 million, which he might. I would not be shocked. But let me ask you this. I did some math here, and again, if my math is mathing, if you added a 5th year to Tua Tagovailoa's contract, that's the common quarterback extension, right? You have a 4-year contract for your rookie deal with the 5th-year option for a first-round pick. Then usually guys sign another 5-year contract, right? So say you added a 5-year deal with the same average contract per year, 5 years, $53.1 million per year. Do you know what that comes out to? Only $265 million. So I know people are saying $300 million for Brock Purdy, but would the Niners actually go $35 million more than Tua Tagovailoa? Now, I'm not saying Tua is better than Purdy or Purdy's better than Tua. Obviously, I have my opinion of the quarterbacks. I would lean towards Purdy, been far more successful, but the Dolphins did not pay Tua a lot of money. Now, it's $53.1 million, but it didn't set the new record. He's under Burrow and Trevor Lawrence still. And when you see these contracts play out, now we shall see what Jordan Love gets from Green Bay. But if Jordan Love gets a similar contract to Tua, I don't know if Brock Purdy's going to get $300 million. He might. He certainly might. But like right now, it's like the Dolphins may have helped the Niners today by, I don't want to say Tua signing cheap, but it was not, a $55 million contract that he signed. It was a $53.1 million contract. It was a 4-year deal that when you put 5 years on it, doesn't even equal $270 million. There's a real chance here, and again, time will tell, Purdy may not even get $300 million. Purdy may not reset the market now if this season progresses and they win a Super Bowl or they go back to the NFC Championship game and he stays healthy. He definitely might get that contract, but it's like the Dolphins may have helped the Niners here a lot. Now, we talked yesterday about Bill Barnwell's prediction for what Purdy's contract could be, his projection. He said $325 million. Now, I'm sorry. I'm not the smartest guy in the bunch. I'm not a mathematician, but there is no way in hell Brock Purdy is going to get 60 or nearly $60 million more. 70, whatever it is, $70 million for what Tua just got. And that's $70 million more if you add in the 5th year that Tua didn't even get. Like, Bill Barnwell's extension is over $100 million more for Brock Purdy than it is Tua Tagovailoa's actual contract. So, again, Bill Barnwell could be wrong, but he's an ESPN guy. He's well respected. He's a smart dude that knows the market well. And of course, he's accounting for market inflation, the salary cap going up, this, that, and the other. But it's really Jordan Love and Brock Purdy, the next two guys that are going to get paid. There's a real chance if Jordan Love signs a 5-year contract, and let's say it is that $270 million, that Tua's contract would be actually over 5 years. There's a real chance Brock Purdy's contract's under $300 million, which I think for the Niners would be a blessing in disguise of like, maybe you don't have to pay. Like, let's be fair here. They're going to have to pay him $50+ million a year. He's going to get probably around 54 to 56 and reset the market per year and get a high guarantee total. But when you're talking about, the actual contract value of total money, he might be under $300 million, which would be a great thing for San Francisco. But again, we shall see. I just thought it was really interesting as a lower contract for Tua than I expected. Only $212 million over 4 years. It's not a lot of money for a guy that was expected to. And I think that's the reasoning, right? He was expected to reset the market. Now, like Laurie Matthews says here, he has concussion issues. Laurie, you're right. There is some real injury history with Tua where there's a reason that contract wasn't 5 years. But then my mind kind of started the gears started to turn. It was like, well, wait a minute. What if Brock Purdy says, you know what? I'm a young guy. I'd rather take a 4-year deal, eerily similar to what Tua just did, and then re-hit the market before I hit the age of 30. I was like, man, like, in a way, it's a great thing for San Francisco, what Miami just did, underpaying Tua from the expectation we had, right? But it also could mean, oh, crap, you don't get that 5th-year deal. You get that 4-year deal instead, which wouldn't doom San Francisco by any means. But what it would mean is that maybe not in 5 years, but in 4 years, you're having a brand new extension with even more money handed to Brock Purdy, depending on what he did. But again, they can't even start those conversations until next off season. So let's shelve those for now. And let's talk about what actually happened at practice today, because for the first time in the new league year, we got our first glimpse of the new kickoff rule. Now, I'll tell you this, it looks really weird. It is not, your eyes are going to say, what is that? Like, it's kind of ugly. And you're just like, I don't like this. If you're like me, you don't love change. My life just changed the last couple of months. I got married. I moved away from home to Southern California. And you're like, oh, this is different. It's hot. It's 110 degrees outside where I'm at. Like, get me somewhere else where it's nice and cool. Thank God for Niners camp, right? But change is not my friend. That said, the new kickoff rule is funky, it's weird, and it might take some time to get used to, but that really isn't the reason why I'm bringing it up. The reason I'm bringing it up is because it's who the Niners had back there fielding kicks that gives us kind of what we already knew, but some insight into what they are thinking, what their thought process is, and who the kick returners might be. Now, if I told you they had 10 total people fielding kicks back there, and the way the new returns are set up is you want to have basically 2 guys back there. It's much more of a college-like system. It's not exactly like that, but in college, they run the 5-4-2. It's very similar to that now, where you're going to have guys lined up, and of course, the kicking team can't move until the ball is kicked, but they're going to likely have 2 return men back there to field the ball. They had people like Jordan Mason and Elijah Mitchell as one tandem, so you had your 2 running backs back there. Deebo Samuel and Kyle Juszczyk were back there together. Ronnie Bell and Trent Taylor were back there together. Danny Gray and Patrick Taylor were there together. Then Cody Schrader and Tariq Owens were paired up. And you have to assume that if guys like Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing, and Isaac Grenda were healthy, they'd be back there as well. But there is a clear, we are doing this. It is get the ball into the hands of a running back. Count the guys out there. Jordan Mason, Elijah Mitchell, Kyle Juszczyk, Patrick Taylor, Cody Schrader. By all means, you may toss Deebo Samuel in there as well. And if you add in Isaac Grendo, it's 7 players of the, you would assume 12 or 13 that are running backs. And I'm sorry, I don't want Kyle Juszczyk fielding kicks. Wouldn't be who I'd put back there. And maybe Juszczyk is replaced with Isaac Grendo. But my point is, there is a clear design to get the ball into a running back's hand, to get the ball into your most explosive players, explosive ball carriers like Jordan Mason, Elijah Mitchell, Deebo Samuel, Patrick Taylor, Danny Gray, Cody Schrader, and eventually probably Jacob Cowing and Isaac Grendo. The history of people like Devin Hester and Dante Hall and D'Angelo Hall and Allen Rossum and Ted Ginn, although all those guys were good at what they did, one of them a Hall of Famer, the idea or the previous archetype of a skinny, young, fast kick returner that only does kick returns is kind of out of the way. It's not going to happen anymore. It'll be that 4th running back. It'll be that bigger bodied, bruising ball carrier that once they get the ball in their hands is the most dynamic type of player you have on your team. Hence why Deebo Samuel is out there. Now, do you want Deebo Samuel out there? Well, I would probably say no, because for a player like Deebo Samuel, despite being this team's 1B next to Christian McCaffrey in regards to being the most dynamic ball carrier on the team, certainly is the most unique ball carrier, I wouldn't want my star receiver fielding kicks, right? How many times do you see a star receiver back there, star running back there, and he gets injured? And it's like, oh my God, like now we've lost you and you're our number one receiver, number two receiver. You're more important to us on offense than you are on special teams. That's why you had players like Ted Ginn, Devin Hester, the Dante Halls of the world who were like, you are the Trenton Holidays of the world. You are going to be the kick return guy only. And if everyone else goes down, then you'll be the receiver we need, right? That's gone out the window. But it does kind of feel like the Niners and maybe even Deebo Samuel himself might be open to being the main kick returner for the team. Now, Deebo Samuel did talk about the new rule in itself, and like I did, he called it weird. He said, but he feels like we, being the kick return team, has a strong advantage, a big advantage is what he said. He said if you make one guy miss, it's basically you, the return man, and the kicker. And the kicker usually doesn't tackle. So I think we are going to see a lot of teams, and I hate to say this, but I don't want to see what Kansas City has in mind. Maybe for Kadarius Toney, if you don't want him lining up on offsides, he's your return man, right? But there's going to be a lot of teams trying new things. I wouldn't be surprised if you see people like Jonathan Taylor back there for the Colts. I wouldn't be shocked if you see, a lot of teams' stars, actual stars back there. I also wouldn't be shocked if San Francisco at a time has people like Deebo Samuel back there, has a young player like Garendo if he's healthy, right? And we've talked about during the scouting report process of a lot of these young players need to find their niche. And for players like Cowing and Garendo and Cody Schrader, they're almost made for the new kickoff rule. And I think seeing it for the first time in person and hearing Deebo talk about it, Deebo himself said there's going to be a lot more touchdowns this year off kickoffs. It's going to be, I think of, game time situations, right? A game scenario. You're down by 4, you're down by 3, 10 seconds on the clock. The NFL is going to find themselves in situations where you give a return man 10 to 15 seconds to work with, they may get a 60-yard return and set up a game-tying field goal or a game-winning field goal, which is what they want. They want more offense, mind you. But a lot of kickoffs aren't going to be gimmies or the game's over, kick it out of the end zone, which can still happen. But I think we are going to see even more points being scored. Now, how much is that? We have no idea. But we are going to see teams strategize more with their kick return men. And Deebo Samuel was asked, would he want to be the kick return man? He said he would not mind returning kicks from the get-go. And he's actually open to being the full-time kick returner if he's asked by the coaching staff. Now, I heard that and I said, nope, please don't, nope. But then I said, the Niners are never afraid to utilize Deebo in a playoff game or a big game doing kicks. Never afraid. They will put him back there if they need a big return. And I think now you may not have a one bona fide return man, but what you might see in big game scenarios, playoff games, divisional games, when the score is tight towards the end in the fourth quarter, you may see teams take out their what is called their special teams guy, their penciled in kick returner, and put their best player out there. I think you actually will see that now, where you're going to see teams, Derrick Henry, I wouldn't be surprised if he's out there for the Ravens. Or, by all means, could the Ravens put Lamar Jackson as their kick returner with the game on the line in the playoffs? Why not? My goodness, why not? You can even have the other guy catch it and give it to him. He's so dynamic. Josh Allen for the Bills, these are quarterbacks, but still, you are going to see teams tweak and do these weird things. And especially come playoff time, I would not be shocked to see McCaffrey or again, a Deebo Samuel back there doing kickoffs. Now, My question to you is, would you want to see that? Because today was a boring day. Nothing really happened. It was like, it's a training camp, cool. But when you hear things like this, my mind doesn't think of, today's practice. It thinks of Super Bowl 59 if San Francisco gets back there, or the NFC Championship game. Teams are going to have to bulk up on their defensive side of special teams, but also I think San Francisco might be the most equipped team to utilize the new kickoff rule to their advantage. Their offense is stacked. Deebo, Aiyuk, McCaffrey, Kittle, younger players, Cowing, Pearsall, Schrader, Garendo, Juwan Jennings. All of those guys at a certain point, if you wanted to, could be your kick return man. Obviously, they rank differently, but I think San Francisco could benefit immensely from this, where you're setting up Jake Moody for a game-winning, 55-yard field goal in Super Bowl 59. Wouldn't that be incredible? I mean, my mind just goes to the most intense spots of the season, and I think San Francisco, if they play their hands right and play their cards right, could actually benefit the most from this and actually set themselves up to win maybe more games by a higher number, or just kind of finish off their opponents, not have themselves pinned back at the 5 or 25-yard line. You're going to see kicks taken to the 30 and 40 more often, where your defenses are kind of on their heels. And through 3 practices so far, the Niners defense has looked good, but for as good as it is for a return team, your defense has to be 10 times better now, because again, you're going to give Mahomes the ball on the 45-yard line consistently. You're going to give Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and for other teams, Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan in this offense, the ball on the 45-yard line more consistently. You have to be able to get off the field, and it's going to be a lot tougher to stop offenses this season if the kick return rule plays out how we expect it to. But we haven't seen it live in person in an actual game just yet, but the preseason's coming soon. The Hall of Fame game, I think, is next week. It's flying by. So we are through 4 days of training camp. A lot of good, not much bad. Been some injuries, been some great press conferences. Chris Foerster was phenomenal today. Deebo Samuel was good. And it's so funny because the way Deebo Samuel ended today's press conference was essentially by just being rather rude to Grant Cohn, which that sucks for Grant, but you can just tell there is so much disdain for him in that room. And it's awkward. It's so awkward because you can feel it. Whether you're there in the room or you can feel it through the screen, you're like, God, this is uncomfortable for us. Something feels off here, but practice has been really fun so far. Great to cover it for you. If you have any questions, put them down below in the YouTube. I promise I get to every single comment. Do you think Tua Tagovailoa's new contract could make Brock Purdy's contract fall under $300 million? I think it might, which is only good news for San Francisco. What has been your biggest takeaway at training camp so far? I want to kindly ask you to like, share, and subscribe. If you're on the audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, whatever you're listening to, give us a 5-star rating and put whatever you want in the review. Did you see Deadpool and Wolverine? You can put your review of that in the review for our podcast. I could care less. Give us 5 stars. It is the cheapest and easiest way to help the show out. If you kindly would, follow us on social media at 49ers_access is the Twitter. 49ers.access is the Instagram. If you want to see your Niners play this year, use our promo code 49ersaccess. It's 49 ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com and save yourself $20 off your first purchase. Before we go, Bobo has one last question. Do you see Drake Jackson being released before the season? No, I don't. But we have to see him practice first. That being said, thank you so much for watching and listening. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and until next time, until those pads come on next week, my name is Sterling Bennett. As always, enjoy your weekend. and stay faithful.